If you put like a kind of a mediocre landscape up on Instagram, that everybody likes it. You know, it's all a Twitter. If you put up a really, really great portrait, hardly anybody appreciates it or even notices it. And I think that's a real shame. What is the definition of a portrait? I have no idea. If I had to write that down, it would be probably several hundred pages. I think a portrait involves some aspect of humanity, and it says something about that person, place, or activity. And I think that's the definition of a portrait. Now, how you interpret that visually as an artist or a photographer or whatever, or a painter, is really up to you. So the portrait is wide open. I think of all the great portrait artists, they're all over the map. You know, they're all over the place. A portrait can be a pair of hands. A portrait can be a couple of feet. I have one portrait that I did. It's a mother and two children, and they're all wearing their breakup boots. The portrait goes to the knees. One pair is a flowered pair, one pair is a traditional pair, and one pair is a pink pair. And it's obviously one of those spring days where everything's wet. The snow has just melted away and everything's moist and it's kind of spitting rain. And this mom and her two daughters have these boots on. And so to me, that portrait, right, and it's truly a portrait, it doesn't involve a face, but it says a great deal about those people. It says a great deal about this time and this place we call Alaska in the springtime. I think to have that everyday person, not in a dress-up mode, but more in a, this is some lady out watering lawn. What is she wearing? What is her hairstyle? What type of glasses is she wearing? What does the hose look like? What kind of plants is she watering? What's growing here at this time and place? What size are the trees behind her? What does the architecture look like? Those kinds of little details within the photograph make it interesting. They're interesting to me now. I can imagine how much more interesting they'll be 50 to 100 years from now. 6 years ago, I decided I was going to do a portrait every day for a year. I started that project and it was kind of excruciating for about the first 6 months. And not because I didn't like making portraits, it was because I had a hard time remembering to make my portrait for the day. I mean, we can photograph for runners. You want to do that? Let me go see if these guys are willing and able. But the next 6 months were surprisingly easy, where it became kind of a habit. I started making my portraits, and I'd make sometimes 3 or 4 a day. And then at the end of the day, I'd have to choose one to put up on my blog. At the end of the year, though, with a lot of work, my wife said to me, "Wow, I imagine you're really happy to be done with that project." And I said, "Oh, are you kidding? Anybody can do a year. Who can do a decade?" So I'm more than halfway through now my decade of making a portrait a day. And where I am mostly is Anchorage, Alaska. Most of my photographs have been photographed here. And then even within that confine, most of my photographs have been shot right here in my neighborhood, South Addition, Anchorage. And then even closer in, most of the photographs are of my neighbors. I can always go to Westchester Lagoon, and I can always find people, whether they're the hardcore runners. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I photographed you?
No.
No, stay right here. Whether it's the people out ice skating, whether it's people floating boats in their kayaks in the summertime or whatever, there's always somebody at Westchester Lagoon. So I know that I can get at least the more outgoing sector of our community at Westchester Lagoon. Good boy. Good boy. Nice. What do you think? You see that?
Oh, that's pretty fantastic.
I wouldn't miss the 4th of July parade, because the 4th of July parade is the best kind of mash of cultural age, social economic backgrounds of people. I mean, you find all people. Anybody who's in town is pretty much at the 4th of July parade. They talk about 100 different languages being spoken in the school systems here in Anchorage, that we are the most diverse community. Well, if you want to see diversity, go to the 4th of July parade. You see the Hmongs next to the Philippines, next to the Thai, next to the Chinese, next to the African Americans, next to Europeans. They're all there. They're all there. One of my favorite photographs from the 4th of July parade is 2 Russian kids who are selling American flags. Right? And they speak real broken English. They're from Russia, and they're selling American flags at the 4th of July parade. And so, to me, that's the classic image. It's like entrepreneurship by first-generation people who come to America, and they see a need and they fill it. And I think that's just fabulous. That's what Anchorage is all about. It's a fabulous mash of cultures and social backgrounds. It's all mixed up and smashed together at the 4th of July parade. And I love that. In a lot of ways, it's probably like New York City is, or certainly was, 100 years ago, when everybody came through Ellis Island, and you had people from all over the world, and they were all kind of mashed into one place. Lewis Hines photographs from that period, some of the great photographers that documented that situation, and it's crazy, it's wild. And I think we have an aspect of that here. Being a photographer in Anchorage, Alaska, not only do I have the great aspects of Anchorage and its cultural diversity, but then I go out into rural Alaska where I have distinct, different groups of native people who have been in Alaska for different times, some 1,000 years, some 5,000 years. And they have different languages, and they have different cultures, and they have completely different ways of doing things. If you want to talk about diversity, Alaska is the best. Right here and now, Anchorage is a great place to be. And I feel very fortunate that my photography has grown up here. My skills and my identity as a photographer has had a chance to stretch and grow during this time. I feel very fortunate.